Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Eleanor. As Eleanor mentioned, my name is John Matthew, Director of Cloud and Automation here at Red 8. Red 8 is one of the divisions of the parent company for Second Gear and Red 8. So our team spends a lot of time doing cloud stuff, non-data center stuff, and one of those things, what you do is VDI, which is a very exciting case. And I'm on the phone with me is Tim Muse. Good morning, Tim. So Tim will be doing a little demo at the end for everybody on what Azure VDI or Windows Virtual Desktop looks like. So I believe everybody understands what virtualization is, how powerful that is, and where that can help out. Specifically today, we're going to talk about the virtual desktop interface that has become so popular in these unfortunate times with remote work and remote learning. I know we all want to be back at school and back at our offices doing work like we used to. But in the meantime, we have an option to do remote work with Windows Virtual Desktop. So for those of us that don't know what this is a system built in Azure, so Microsoft's cloud, for running either remote desktops or remote applications, and I'll show that in a second. It has some unique advantages. Number one would probably be the fact that you can run multiple sessions of Windows 10. So instead of having to dedicate a single virtual machine in the cloud to a user, you can actually have more than one, right? So 10, 20, or roughly, 20 is about where you want to limit that. Again, Tim will demonstrate that later today. So it's optimized for that, and in the past we've been multi-session Windows Server, but today with Azure VDI you can do that in the cloud with multiple users on Windows 10. Secondly would be they've bought some technology recently that allows you to really optimize how Office applications work in the Azure VDI, and I'll demonstrate that in just a second. And then lastly, well, not lastly, but another option is you can migrate your existing remote desktop services over to Azure VDI very quickly. And then lastly, because of the cloud, you have a lot of agility and scalability in minutes. You can spin up a single desktop, and then you can tell the system, hey, when people start logging in, give me hundreds, potentially thousands of desktops. So that's again the top reasons why you'd want to use a virtual desktop in the cloud, because you get all of these options with Azure VDI. Again, we'll cut through some of these. And then along those lines, as I tell people, right, Microsoft has done a very good job on the desktop in years past, and recently with Windows 10 has done a really, really nice job of improving that product and making it very flexible. Along those lines, they've changed their licensing. So you don't actually need a PhD anymore in Microsoft licensing. You just really need sort of a master's degree in Microsoft licensing. I say that in jest. Microsoft licensing is a lot simpler now with regards to the cloud, the desktop, Office, etc. So you can buy a single license that gets you the Windows desktop, gets you an Azure desktop, and it also gets you Office. And we won't spend a lot of time on that, but our team helps customers a lot with the Microsoft 365 licensing and getting that over to customers, and how we can spend less money getting a lot more out of the system. Again, as Tim will demonstrate, the labor costs in terms of spinning up desktops now is much reduced, because you either click a button or you set up some automation to do that. So one of the things that is nice about this, as I mentioned, is they've purchased a product called FX Logic, which allows them to optimize the Office experience. So I'm going to take a little quick break here just to demonstrate what's actually happening on my side. So we are obviously running a PowerPoint, right? That's pretty straightforward there. However, what I want to demonstrate is the fact that this PowerPoint is coming from a remote server in the cloud. I am not running this on my desktop. As you can see the little icon here. Tim, hopefully that shows up okay.
Yes, it does.
Okay, so the icon here indicates that it is a remote application, and that is done through this remote desktop app here. This is either on your desktop, or you can access this from a website as well. The beauty here is in our environment, I've been limited to a certain set of applications, one of them obviously being PowerPoint. I have Word, and I also have Excel. So if I want to fire up Excel, right, it comes up pretty quick. But again, it's not running on my desktop. It's running in the cloud on a remote desktop. And you can see that here by the little icon. So I don't need to run Excel right now. But as well as I get a full desktop if necessary. So in your environments, you have a lot of flexibility to either run specific applications for users. Now, Tim will demonstrate how you can limit what people see. Or if you need to get them a full desktop in the cloud, that is available as well. So I just wanted to point that out very quickly because sometimes it's lost in all of these PowerPoint tech sessions. Around the Office 365 piece, basically, you don't if you've done a VDI deployment in the past, this makes things much more efficient with regards to where you're logged in, how you're logged in. Things are very, very quick. We're not going to actually demonstrate that today, but it is possible to do that. So the last thing I want to mention on the advantages of Azure VDI is the scalability, right? We mentioned this. The cloud brings two very important things to businesses and education systems. Scalability, meaning you have essentially unlimited scale around the world, and more importantly, agility, right? So again, we've mentioned that you can scale up from one to tens of thousands of desktops in virtually minutes. And that's not something you could probably do back at your own data center or even a colo. So again, the cloud across the spectrum of applications and resources is able to scale very, very quickly. And again, Tim will point that out in his management interface. The other thing that's very important that Microsoft brings to the table, I mentioned the number one was the multi-user Windows 10, but the other thing that's sort of glossed over is the fact that if you have Windows 7 apps that can't be migrated to Windows 10, you can move those to Azure's virtual desktop and you will get 3 more years of Windows 7 virtual desktop security updates. So that's a big plus that isn't pushed a lot, but again, we have customers that, don't have the time or the vendor hasn't supported it, but they need to run that critical application on Windows 7. So that is something to continue to think about as you think about moving to Windows desktop. And then lastly, before I give it over to Tim, and I'll keep this short, I don't want to do too much salesy stuff. I mentioned the licensing, right? So the licensing to get Windows Desktop is fairly straightforward. Any of the Microsoft 365 licenses gets you there, in addition to the variety of Windows 10 licenses as well. So again, our goal here is to show you, it's a very, very nice product. It's very, very easy to spin up, as Tim will demonstrate. It's easy to obtain via licensing, and it also does have some really, really nice benefits over other remote desktop solutions. And again, what I mentioned is our team, what we spend our time is helping customers save money by using either reserved instances, automation, what have you. So with that, I think Tim is ready to go.
Sure am. Thank you, John. So, as John kind of mentioned, it's WVD. Azure WVD is very similar to Microsoft Remote Desktop. For any of you that have that spun up in your environments, I came from a background of where actually I worked with several smaller charter schools. And we had a good habit of going in and spinning up RDS for them, because what you could do is essentially you can take 500 users and put them in an environment, or 500 students and put them in an environment where they have all of their custom apps. So if you're running Aries, if you're running any of the custom education apps or business apps or anything you need for them to access, it's all there and ready to go with the customizations that they need. You don't have to spin up a new desktop or spin up a laptop or etc. And it's actually the way WVD is structured is there's kind of five steps, I'd say, to get a good WVD instance going. And the first step is an image creation. And what that is just a custom image. If you have one for a laptop, it's very similar. These will typically, you'll want to build them from scratch in Azure. And that kind of looks like this image here. Really, all you do is you spin up a VM. You go in and log into that VM, set up any customizations you want, sysprep it, and then hit a button to capture it and save it as that image. Very simple, very clean. And I say let's do it in Azure because there's a couple of features on the back end that you get when you start from an Azure image. And we'll dig into that here in a minute. And then the next step you'll want to do is you have to build what's called your Windows Virtual Desktop tenant, and that is a globally unique object, and that's essentially builds the management layer. So if, again, I'll go back to this RDS reference because, like I say, it's very similar, but Microsoft's done a very good job of pushing that to Azure and at scale. And essentially, the WVD tenant is the management structure. So if you built RDS in the past, you have the connection broker, you have the license server, you have any sort of load balancer you want to put in front of that, whether it's the Microsoft brand or the F5 or the NetScaler, take your choice. Azure does that for you now. You don't have to manage any of that. You just click a few buttons, you get a name, and you go. Once you have that, then you can build what's called host pools. And as you can see here, we've got kind of 2 host pools built. Each one is currently only a single virtual machine. We have an application host pool, and then we have a desktop host pool. And these service all of our users. And I'll pop into this is the Azure side of things. I'll pop into the a specific WVD management console so you can kind of see that. These are our 2 session hosts, or our 2 host pools. We have our desktop and our remote app host pool, and they service separate things. So you cannot combine them. You have to have one that's dedicated for desktop and one that's dedicated for remote apps. And so to build these, that's back on the Azure side. It's a very simple thing. You can pop into Azure and type in host pool, and you see it pop up here. You provision a host pool, and that just takes some information essentially. So if you're familiar with Azure, you'll recognize a lot of this stuff. If not, it might be a little new. But essentially, you tell it what resource group you want, what region you want. Again, anywhere across any of the Azure regions. You give it a host pool name, and this is more of just a friendly name. It kind of shows up when you're working with the remote desktop. It's not it doesn't have to be global unique. It's very simple. Keep it something descriptive, you know. So I'll spin up a desktop or a host pool here for student desktop. And then you choose the desktop type, whether it's personal or pooled. And pooled is, as John was talking about, where you can get upwards of 20 users. Usually you can get up to 40, depending on workload. If it's a heavy workload or a medium workload, you kind of want to keep that a lot lower. But if it's light usage, or if they're just using internet apps or Word, Excel, PowerPoint, etc., pooled up to about 40 users is pretty good. Or if they are those high workloads, you might want to consider going with personal desktops, and you give a VM to each user. You can add some default users here if you like, just a list of users. I know there was also recently, if you guys are keeping up with it, there is a new management console and a new thing they've done with Azure WVD where you can actually add in groups. That's something else to dig into at a later time. Once you have your basics here, you pop into your virtual machines and you kind of get a calculator here. So this is how I was talking about when you have a light workload versus a medium, a heavy, or power, et cetera. You can kind of click through here and, let's for instance, if you have some heavy users and you have, let's say 200 of them, you kind of see you get a calculation of it's going to spin up 25 VMs, and these are 4 cores and 16 gigs of memory. For the purpose of the demo, I don't really want to spin up 25 VMs, so I'm going to go back to light and just 5. It gives us 1. And then you give it a virtual name prefix. So this is your actual computer name that it'll spin up. And when it spins these up, if you were doing 25 or 50 VMs, it'll spin these up and it'll say R8 STU desktop, and then it'll do a -0 or a -1, and it'll just increment down as needed. Then the virtual machine settings. So this digs in a little bit more. You have the option here of whether you want to use your custom image. You can use a gallery image from Microsoft. So if you're just kind of playing around with WVD and you want to test it out, you can spin up just a gallery image, and it's very simple. You have your Windows 10 enterprise solutions here, multi-session or personal, as well as if you want it installed with Office 365 Pro Plus. And if you did want to do a server grade, you can do that as well here. Your disk type, standard or premium SSD, and then this would be a domain service account. So this will be something where you'll want to spin up a service account, and every time that Azure spins up a new machine, or whether you spin up a new machine, it will use this account and this password to do so. Excuse me. You can then, if you are in a multi-domain environment, you can specify your domain here as well as a OU path that you want the machines to be put into. This is especially useful if you have any sort of GPOs or group policies that you'd like to apply to your WVD machines. That's actually the reason why I'm specifying this. There are a few things you do have to have set for that, set for these machines. And then you specify a virtual subnet, which reset on me. Getting a little feedback from somebody here. And then you specify a virtual machine subnet, and then you're good to go there. And then so this is when you get into the VDI tenant information. So this is the information you set up before. We have a global unique ID. So you specify the tenant name, and then we'll typically specify again another service principal. This is an Azure service principal. So a service principal is essentially just another service account, but done in Azure, and it'll automatically generate these strings for you, which are insanely long and very hard to crack. And then once you're done with that, it's just a simple review and create. And I'm going to go ahead and spin this up. This will take probably a good 20 to 30 minutes, so I think we're probably going to be done with the demo by the time this finishes. But I'm going to go ahead and hit create here. And you'll see that's going to kick off our deployment. It'll submit and it'll start going. All right, and so once you have that, we'll switch back over to the management console here. Once you have that, I'm going to go ahead and look at the remote app. The desktop is pretty simple. You get an RDP desktop that your users can pop into. But looking specifically at remote app, because you kind of dig into some extra features here. So we'll go ahead and pop into our remote app host pool, and we can view our hosts from here. So this is just our single host that we have running, and then we can also view our app groups. So you can specify multiple different app groups if you want to specify it out via different groups of users. Let's say you have a 6th grade user set versus a 4th grade versus an 8th grade. You can do it that way, or however this works for your organization. We'll pop in here and you can look, and actually you can see which users are then assigned to this app group. So we have a bunch of our engineers here that have been kind of playing around in the environment. And you can also notice here that we actually have John Matthews active. So it's kind of helpful to see who's in the environment currently. And then the other part too, how we were talking about apps. So here's the apps that John has access to: Excel, Internet Explorer, Outlook, PowerPoint, Publisher, etc. And it's actually very simple here when you're working with these. Once you have an application installed, you can do it a couple ways. You can publish an app from a path, which is a more, I'd say, advanced way, I guess. And you can do this via PowerShell as well if you're in any automation or any sort of infrastructure as code. And you can just publish it from a path where you specify all this information. Or for me, I want to keep it simple. I'm going to just publish an app from the start menu. So I'm going to click here. It's going to pull any host in the host pool, and it's going to see everything we have installed. And let's say I need to give them access to OneDrive, for example. So I can go ahead and before I click this, I want to show you because I have the exact same environment. So as you can see, we have no OneDrive here. This is the web interface for WVD. So I'm going to go ahead and pop OneDrive on here. I'm going to go ahead and publish that. And as you can see, it's pretty quick. So if day one something's going wrong and you need to quickly publish an app or add and remove an app, you can easily just add that, have the users refresh their page, and now I have OneDrive all of a sudden. So it's very easy, very quick, very agile. It's kind of why we love the cloud. Everything's kind of tight in here, and if you're familiar with the RDS days, you can usually do that, but every now and then you'll have an issue. And just the beauty here is the scale. And then once you kind of have this and you have the host pool and you have all your remote apps filled out, it's the beauty for me and the reason why I love WVD is I like it as I don't need a VPN client. So I have this front end web interface. I'm not on any sort of VPN. I just logged in, connected, and I now have all of these applications running essentially in my company's lab that I can connect to. So I'm going to pop over here to the desktop client, and I'm going to go ahead and open up Internet Explorer here. It wants me to go and log in. Let me pull that over. So this is a standard user interface that your users would see. If you do have MFA and you want to keep that enabled, you can do that. So I'm going to hit that on my phone here. And so it is establishing an RDS session essentially for me. Let me pull that over. That's our. So it takes a minute for the first time you connect a single app. Once this RDS session is enabled, essentially your computer has made that connection to that back-end server. And at that point, it is pretty snappy. So you see we have here our Internet Explorer, and again, this is via remote app. And just for a demonstration, so now that I have that session connected, so if you have multiple apps like this, when you have your users, you can just pop open Word, and it's very quick. I already have Word open. So just a nice little example of the first one takes a minute. After that, it's very quick. I've logged into this cluster. All right. All right, so let me, and just like I say, for an example, I am now connected to a backend VPN that's connected directly to Azure. So if I ever needed to, I could pop in here, and of course our cert's out of date. I can pop in here and just hop onto a Palo that's actually sitting in our lab without a VPN client or without anything, without any extra clients or anything that you'd have to deploy to students. So if you have some sort of custom in-house web-built app, you don't need to now deploy that or open that up to the web where you're then vulnerable to any sort of HTTP attacks. You can just open up it to the Azure WVD and then deploy that to your users, which is typically a bit more secure. And then, like I say, there's kind of some secret sauce as well on the back end that John mentioned about FS logics, as well as some auto scaling and some automation you can do. And I don't really have a good demo of that. The reason being is that that's very custom. Depends on the company. We've had some companies that don't need it, some companies that do. And essentially, FS logic is, if you're familiar with user profile disks, and that might be a pain point for a lot of people, because of Microsoft's acquisition of FS logics, that's tied in on the back end now, and it's a very nice marrying for this all together and to bring it to Azure. It operates in a similar method, but due to the way it's installed, functions functions way better. It allows you to have, if you do have these multi sessions here where you have a desktop pool and an application pool, users can be logged into both pools at once using their same profile. So it's a lot closer to like a OneDrive profile. It's not a OneDrive, but it's closer to this profile that you have a flexibility with. And also around auto scaling too. If you notice you have a user trend where they're logged in between 9 and 4, you can set up some auto scaling where if you have 100 machines, 90 of those will turn off after 5 o'clock and then they turn on the next morning at 8. Or you can have it do it based off metrics. You can hop in and look at Azure metrics, and as you see users log in, it will automatically scale up and turn on additional machines to meet the needs of your users. And again, like I said, it's very custom and very unique to each organization and how they want to run that. And the beautiful part of Azure is it's that simple. There's nothing else crazy, and that's kind of that's about the end of my demo here. Let me see. I haven't looked at chat if we have any questions.
Tim?
So we don't have any questions yet. For anyone that did join late, just a reminder that we do have this session recorded. So it will be available after the session ends, and it'll also be available on our Tech Talk Tuesday webpage. All right, anything else? John, do you have anything to add?
No, I don't. I hope everybody enjoyed that. We've shown off the main points of Azure Windows Virtual Desktop, and adding apps, removing, giving access to things on the fly. I think shows the agility of the whole platform, as well as the simple way to go. Brian Dooley says, any real world cases to show the savings you articulated earlier in the presentation? Good question, Brian. So a lot of it has to do with if we have a lot of customers with call centers who are due to Second Gear, are obviously Second Gear is doing very well right now, selling laptops to remote users. And so we have a lot of customers who are call centers for Second Gear, looking at using Azure VDI for a couple of reasons. One is a primary reason for them is capital loss. They tend to send out these laptops to call center contacts and they don't come back. So there's a capital loss there. But more importantly for them is the speed. Meaning if they have a new customer, they sign up and they need 200 agents on that app very quickly. As awesome as Second Gear and fast as they are, they can't get 200 laptops out very quickly. However, they could spin up 200 desktops in a matter of, as Tim showed, minutes. So it's a cost savings both from a speed of business, and then there's the option of spinning down those environments as you need them based on your business. I hope that gets your question answered there.
Great. Thanks, John. And it seems like that's it. So just a big thank you to John and Tim for today's presentation. If anybody has additional questions or want to discuss further, please reach out to their Second Gear representative, or you can always email the team at info@secondgear.com. Be sure to join us next Tuesday on June 2nd. We do have a session on Extend Your Campus Network to the community for remote learning using the CARES Act. Again, thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing everyone online next week.